Welcome to Lean by Design podcast. I'm your host, Oscar Gonzalez, alongside my co-host, Lawrence Wong. We are former MBA classmates turned business partners with over 25 years of combined experience in life sciences. From R&D through manufacturing, our experiences have shed light into the complex, ever-changing challenges experienced by this industry and many others. We took a risk, quit our six-figure paying jobs in Boston, biotech, and pharma to start Sigma Lab Consulting. Journey with us as we explore the relationship between people and workflow design. The goal? To learn, inspire, and deliver practical tips to navigate these ever-changing challenges. Stick with us and learn to work smarter, not harder, and be lean by design. Welcome back to another episode of Lean by Design podcast. Today, we have a few things we're going to talk about in the world of project and portfolio management. There was a white paper that was recently sponsored by Smartsheet. Disclaimer, we are users of Smartsheet. I have been using it for right about 8 years. I've seen the evolution of the software of the company that just reached $1 billion in revenue. Congratulations to them. And they recently released a white paper that they sponsored with IDC. We'll link that into the show notes. And really the question that they were looking to get answers to was, in this ever-changing world, in this industry, biopharma industry, where projects and advancements are becoming ever more complex, the work continues to increase and these developments continue to increase, and at times they're viewed as disruptions. They can shift a flexible model that has been necessary after COVID, that these organizations now need to start really have clear and direct messaging on how to manage the work across these hybrid teams, these projects, these teams, and time zones. So one of the questions that they had were that there are organizations out there that are they're crushing it. But what is contributing to their success, to their thriving organizations with teams that effectively communicate, that effectively align, that it just seems like everybody is on the same page all the time? What are they doing? And so this was a very, it was focused on the project program, portfolio management tools. But if you take a look at the white paper, you can see sort of the questions that they had there. The white paper had a total of 629 respondents from business IT. It was a global survey this was in 5 sectors. Yes, healthcare, life sciences, IT, education, and government. So what they did was they asked for business priorities over the next 12 months to understand where these organizations were and what they were going to prioritize over the next few years or over the next few months. So the actions to drive the results, the priorities to drive those strategic results. And what does all that mean? And how are these organizations running this? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Very interesting stuff, Lawrence. I took a look at this report, and it didn't really feel shocking to me, but I think that in some cases it would, because there does seem to be this big move to invest in project tools that allow you to be very flexible across the organization. I mean, we've already talked about AI-driven processes that are, it seemed to be the topic of conversation in the conference this past week at Scope in Orlando. AI was probably every other conversation. We even had conversations with members of the FDA, with representatives from the FDA on AI, which a guidance is going to be coming out on clinical trials and AI in the coming weeks, a draft guidance that FDA has been asking for us to provide feedback from, because we're the ones that are going to be running trials. We, as in organizations, pharma, et cetera. So they're looking for us to understand more of how people are using AI. So just a couple of top hits from the white paper. 93% of the respondents believe that the workflow automation is a priority, but less than 79% are reporting less than half of their project portfolio workflows are automated.
Why
They
is
also, I know, it's intense, it's, and even so, when they look at organizations of higher maturity, they're finding that they're 6 times more likely with higher project portfolio management maturity are 6 times more likely to see a strong or unlimited scalability. Isn't that what everybody wants?
Yeah, I think from the finding that you said about, the obviously I think it's a consensus that the workflow automation is a priority. Um, but ironically, only half of their workflows are automated, right? So why is it that they why is it the case, right? And I think about some of the processes that we work with from our clients, and the reality is that it's messy, and it's often hard to automate something if it is not clean, and that you don't have a defined process for, right, that aligns with the strategy and the goals of the company. So to me, it sounds like the actions of companies are not matching the priorities that they have, and so they're saying one thing, but they're doing something else. Um, and so I think as I glanced through the study, the thing right above it in the key findings was some of the challenges that they face. Uh, so it says here, 47% of respondents cited the expense of these tools. 44% cited lack of integration with other systems of record, and then 41% cited change management concerns. So in the realm of project management, how accurate is this assessment as it relates to the work that you do in managing some of these drug development projects?
I think if I tackle the first one, which is sort of expense, I don't see that so much. I think there are different software that's available that has varying levels of licensing. Now, when you're looking at enterprise solutions, which typically you're going to want your PPM tool to be enterprise wide. Why? Because everyone's running projects. Whether or not it's a R&D or a clinical project, there's probably some project on the finance team to create a little bit more efficiency. The legal team probably has a project where they're trying to initiate a new system. There's some level of management, even executive leadership. They have these leadership committees that they need to be able to log in who's talking, what's the conversation, what are the decisions from this, what are the actionable outcomes from the 4 hours that we just spent with the top leaders of our organization. These things need to be logged in somewhere. They need to be available somewhere so that you can have it as a reference tool. You can use it to sort of power the next steps. So I haven't seen too much of the expense side. Now, in terms of how much that expands, I think it's very common for folks to have, for organizations to, maybe focus that those tools in their project and portfolio management space initially. And then what I find is that over time, as adoption, as usage begins to grow, that sort of accessibility becomes more organic and folks begin to ask for more access. They ask for licensing because they saw that this group did something that was really helpful and had a great way of organizing it, and it sent out alerts without having to do that. It decreased the amount of manual emails they had to do. So organically, it starts to grow a little bit. I think it is difficult to create an enterprise-wide solution right off the bat and just say, hey, everybody's going to be doing this because, as you mentioned before, those are some of, the challenges. What was that second one? Can you remind me one more time?
So the second one was lack of integration, but I want to go back to the point that you made about expense. I think depending on how you deploy it, obviously don't. Like, this is just a general rule. You're not committing fully to an enterprise tool without actually doing a pilot, understanding,
Right.
okay, does this actual solution work for this project that I'm trying to drive? And then once you kind of work out the kinks, then you can go, okay, let's scale this thing and let's get some more users on it, right? Obviously, nobody's looking at a tool like Smartsheet and going, yeah, let's just get 5,000 people to get on the platform and start using it, because they're not going to use it. And when you
Right.
do that, you're just, that's where the expense comes in. And I think the other part of it is understanding how expensive is it now for you to run your projects without this PPM tool, right? Because
Right.
I don't think people often think about how much that operation costs versus, hey, if we use this thing to speed up the project, what does that look like? What is the cost savings from using this tool, right? They're
What
always
is
looking
this
at, oh, how much is this going
costing?
to cost?
But what is it costing your organization to not have a solution?
Right.
What is it costing your team to be in a struggle to locate information, to identify information? And what's really neat about these PPM tools, in many cases, they are super customizable. So what I mean by that is you can create a level of customization for your own organization. Now, to learn and to understand how these systems work is pretty simple. There's usually some type of tag, and you start to find the similarities between activities, between initiatives, and you are sort of connecting all of these things via specific categories, project numbers, people, et cetera, so that you can build these robust reports that give you specific views that you're looking for. The idea here is that these project portfolio management tools, they're looking into your operations and you are asking it to give you back something specific. You're not going back in there to look at every line by line item. But as I mentioned to most people, you're collecting that information somewhere, whether you're writing it in a notebook that really doesn't give you much leverage with that piece of data, because now that piece of data is a handwritten piece of data on a piece of paper and it's not digital, it's not digitized. So when you start to use these PPM tools for sort of your day-to-day activities, you start to find that most of what you're doing in the day-to-day is now has a digital footprint. And what can you do with that? Well, you can get numbers, you can get metrics, you can connect it to somebody else. So I think that there's a lot of value there. And again, to your point, what does this cost look like now if you don't act on bringing that unity into that project, into those operational tasks?
We'll be right back after a quick break. In biopharma, success isn't just about innovation. It's about connection. Between systems and teams, between data and decisions, between goals and the people driving them. At Sigma Lab Consulting, we call this the Biopharma Nexus, the network of relationships that hold your organization together and keeps progress moving. When those connections align, teams work with clarity, speed, and confidence. When they don't, workflows slow down, decisions take longer, and effort gets lost. We help life science organizations simplify how work gets done by strengthening the connections between people, processes, and technology, so that your team can make better decisions and move faster with less friction. If you're ready to reduce complexity and restore flow, start with a risk check at sigmalabconsulting.com and start simplifying how work gets done.
Yeah, so that touches on the lack of integration with other systems of record. And I think the last point here is about 41% cited change management concerns. So again, not all PPM tools are created equal, right? So you could have a PPM tool, let's say like a Microsoft project, where you have a project file, but that file doesn't allow you to collaborate with other people. And so even if you had something digitized, it doesn't mean that you can necessarily share it. There's very limited visibility unless it resides on some SharePoint, which then you'd have to download, update, and there's all these, I would say, areas of friction that to make
Right.
you not want to update it constantly, and you're having to download things, upload, and it's much less flexible than, let's say, a solution like Smartsheet, where you have some these essentially nodes that you can create, right, that connect information from all different sorts of sheets, reports that feed up into a dashboard. So that was kind of my opinion on, I think these challenges are well articulated in that, yes, they are some top challenges. I think something that I've seen just from larger companies maybe not committing fully to Smartsheet or some other SaaS
Mm-hmm.
PPM tool is they're just creating their own tools internally, right? So whether you're using some sort of like coding, or maybe you are leveraging some of these Microsoft tools, you're building essentially something for your own organization and then trying to scale it to your teams. But again, that's like a grassroots thing, and it takes
Yeah.
very long for you to do that, and you're essentially designing a product for your company.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be a lot harder maybe a decade ago, but now with all these new AI tools and other uh, essentially software building tools, you can leverage those to create the solution that you want. But again, it's still not as fluid and dynamic as some of these SaaS products like a Smartsheet.
I think one thing that I give Smartsheet and some of these other project management tools credo to is that when I try to design a solution, I'm not going to look directly with a fine microscope, super fine focus on our industry. I'm a firm believer that there are solutions outside of our industry that influence us. And so when we do create, I think one of the risks when we do go down the route of creating our own software, you're sort of limited by what your knowledge is of the space that you work in. And it's very interesting to me when you start to see, for example, Smartsheet has a lot of templates that are in finance, in HR, and I planned my wedding on Smartsheet and had a dashboard actually to show how many people and the timing and et cetera. You start to see there are event planning on there, all these things that, okay, well, that's event planning. Well, guess what? That offsite meeting that you're having, that's event planning. It doesn't mean that you're planning a wedding, doesn't mean that you're planning a debutante ball or what have you, but it is still in concept, in principle, your offsite, your team offsite is an event that you are planning. So you can leverage those types of tools, and it sort of gives you a different perspective rather than this is science, this is so different than anything else, this is so unique. And in many ways it is. But in many ways it is also standard work that is happening in other places just with a different hat. So what I like about these PPM tools is that they sort of give you a different perspective for how to view something because I love biopharma, but holy cow, we love to make things very complex. And it doesn't always need to be that way. So, I think that's also part of what that change management, looks like. And I was actually surprised that the change management wasn't higher. I was expecting that to be one of the top ones because you hear about failures of adoption. You hear about, well, we created this, we designed this, and no one has really adopted it. But as soon as you start asking leading questions, how many trainings have you guys done since then? Oh, well, we did one when we launched. All right, so this is something that you're now trying to create habit within your organization, within your team. You're now trying to build these foundations, and the only way that you're going to do that is by creating new habits within that team. For this is how we're going to work through these items here. You can do everything else the way that you decide that you want to do it, but right now these are the core things that we need to be able to work with, report from, and train in. And when you start to establish that and you create this level of visibility, this consistency in hearing about the dashboard that was built or hearing about the reports that are being automated, it sort of permeates through the teams, through the organization. And that really lends into that change management, because then you start getting a lot of curious people. And that's what you want. You want the curious people to come in and say, hey, this was really cool that this came to me, and like, this is exactly what I needed. And I didn't even have to email anybody. How does this work? And can you tell me about it? And that's when you start to sort of cultivate this layer of adoption. And it's continuing. It's a continuation as things evolve.
Yeah, I mean, these tools are essentially creating opportunities for people to do better work, right? I think you had a point about just making sure that the these tools that these PPM tools are maintained over time, whether it's training or having specific, I would say, advocates in your organization that are maybe super
Champions.
users,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, right? Knowing the ins and
Right.
outs of using the tool itself. And it's very similar to, I think, of when you buy a car and you've been, walking somewhere for the entire time, and you take the car, you drive it to wherever you're supposed to go, and maybe you're driving local traffic, but the car can also go on the highway and you can go a lot faster and go to these other places. But if you did not know what the car was capable of, you wouldn't know to use it, right? So I think that
Right.
my point is just making sure that people are aware that this thing was used for one particular project or one particular process, then they're going to start piquing their curiosity and go, okay, well, what other things can I use this for, right? And that goes back to
Absolutely.
your point about drawing people in and making sure that this thing that you've heavily invested in, and not just in terms of dollars, but time and
Mm-hmm.
people, and putting up some of your highly strategic initiatives in this vehicle for change.
Absolutely. I mean, you brought up a really good example. If I were to ask you right now, have you pressed every button that exists in your vehicle right now? Do you know what every button does? Absolutely not. You heard that there, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely not. And that's that's very common. And that's also very common with some of the software that we have, that we work with every day, because you know what we look for is, how quickly can I get my job done? We don't really look at, how do I expand the spaces or the technology that I'm using? How do I understand that more to even further optimize the work that I'm doing? Even from the perspective of going into, we'll even take a simple example of going into Excel. I go to Excel, I click here, I filter, I create a pivot table, I get this, I create a chart, etc. You can develop a macros that literally records each of your steps. And anytime you decide that you need to execute that series of steps, you can click on the macros and it will actually do that entire thing. Now, you have to do a little bit of setup in the beginning, and there's going to be a little bit of trial and error in the beginning. But I would rather spend that 2 hours up front, so that every time I do this process within something as simple as Excel, that's going to take me no more than 5 minutes, and previously it would take me an hour. So these are some of the things that you have to sort of invest in, not only in yourself, but also understand the technology that you have, and really dig deeper and ask a lot more questions of, what can I do with this? I am doing these levels of activities. This is the level of information that's in here. How else can I leverage this system to empower the work that I'm doing, to create those efficiencies and really drive down the amount of time that I'm spending recording and taking more time to review and reflect on the work that we're doing.
Yeah, and aside from some of I think for us it's very obvious some of the benefits of using these PPM tools. As you went through the paper, was there anything that you were very surprised about in terms of how some of the polling was for I think you said there was like 600 plus respondents for this, and I think for me the biggest surprise that I saw was, I think in somewhere along the beginning of this white paper, it said that most legacy PPM tools don't offer strategic alignment across stakeholders and teams, tending to have poor user experience a significant adoption barrier that leads to sporadic usage and poor data, and requiring a strong organizational mandate and high expenditure for deployment and adoption. So when I read this, I didn't, like, I think there's some truth to this, but I also don't think that the tools alone offer strategic alignment. I think people and leadership do, right? You really have to get whoever is, deciding to commit to this tool, they have to be very clear and upfront about why are we using this and what exactly are you trying to do with this, right? Otherwise,
Where are you
select
going?
this tool and then people just start complaining about things and then they don't use it, and you know how it goes.
And not just that, having the foresight of where can this take us? Where can this take us, and where can, what is the future here? Because if you look online, oh, this is a work management tool that, takes care of, your task, and you can put it here and you can communicate back and forth. Awesome. It's the combination of all of those features that are really showing you, okay, this is how you can connect all these pieces. You need to dictate which ones matter most to your organization, which ones matter most. There's tons of features within Smartsheet that I've never touched. Why? Well, it's not really for R&D development. It's not really for clinical trials. It's not built for that. It's built to manage work. So we sort of leverage some of those standardized things that we do to sort of focus our efforts while taking in any additional changes. I mean, it didn't really surprise me when I read that, because there's sort of this, to your point, if it's not really championed, and we're not considering the strategic direction of the organization, where would this even fit for people to actually do any kind of work into it? The idea is that, well, we want to scale, or we have this many projects that we have to manage. If you have one project, maybe you don't need a PPM tool. But if you have 6 or 7 projects, 9, 10 functions and teams that are all involved in the project, they're not all looking for the same thing, but they all need to know where the project is at all times, just in a different perspective. So you start to look at, what are each of these teams contributing to the project? How do we get that data to also talk to what we're trying to put in together and create this network of information specific to that project? And then that rolls up to your portfolio, rolls up to your leadership, and so on. And so I think that those challenges with adopting the PPM tools is not only just in that project management space, but it's also going to be in those adjacent functions that are also a part of the team. When I read this, so when I took this paper, I took all the data and I started to ask myself, like, what are we actually talking about here from an organizational perspective? What is the key to providing success here? And there's 3 things, and you hear a lot about it: people, your process, and your technology. And some people liken that to sort of your tech stack. Well, technology isn't going to stop. AI is here. We have to recognize that, but we also need to prepare for what that means for an organization. So with people, process, and technology, I actually sort of created this triangle where it goes from people to tech and then looking at your process. Your people and your tech are going to determine what kind of process you can build out with the technology that you have. Your tech is there not necessarily to augment a person. It's more of to expedite the work that you're already doing. Okay. And once you have the people, you have to develop that support too. You cannot say this year everybody needs to have a goal where you're going to of personal development. Okay, well, how are we cultivating that in the organization? Oh, in your free time, get out of town. You want me to land one of the corporate goals that exist for my bonus in many cases on my free time. Have you worked here before? There's not really a lot of free time. And this is also, a challenge for folks to see the value of spending the time to look for these efficiencies, to look for these tools so that they do have the time for personal development, etc. So I look at that, but then I also look at different arrows going in different directions. For example, from the technology to the people. You have this level of technology. You need people to champion it. You need people to root for the success of that technology and have a level of curiosity, because these technologies are built not just to stay within this small bubble of work or effort. Those organizations are going to continue to adapt their technology that they're selling to attract more clients. So it is your responsibility that when you get a new piece of technology, when you find the ownership, they should know more about that tool than anyone else in the organization, more than IT. And it is only to their benefit. It gives you visibility as a person. It gives you ownership. It gives you a lot of credibility when you understand a system from top to bottom. But you really have to dig and understand what are the capabilities of this technology that we're using in all these different spaces. And then how do we connect it in as few steps as possible to give us what we need? And that's, it's this little piece here and making sure that we're developing that culture of transparency and alignment. So, I think for me, there's some key components there between the people, the technology, and what processes you decide to put into there that you can't really just focus into one space. You have to sort of take them all together. What does this mean for the process? Is it going to affect another stakeholder? Don't launch the technology that will affect a process that is also attached to somebody else in a different department or function. You need to bring them along as well, because the expectations change, the process changes. So I think with this, being able to have those, and what can leadership do? I mean, support, process, skills, creating those skills, creating those resources for people to have additional training, bringing somebody in, creating a champion, cultivating that. This stuff becomes habit. You need to create a habit, and you can only do that with practice, with focus. It's an investment in your own improvement, your own personal development, professional development. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think so. To your point about this, three components that are part of this, I guess the strategy of deploying the PPM tool, people, tech, and then process. I think we had talked about right before we were recording, just making sure that these business goals are clear. So that really defines like why you even need this in the first place, right? And so people are saying, hey, we know where we need to go. And so now we need to understand what blend of the tech and our skills can we leverage for this particular process, right? And you're right, it's not a static event, right? Because business goals change, people come in and out of your organization. The technology you may learn has more capabilities, and so now all of those things are influencing what your end process is going to look like. So again, what makes these tools so powerful is that they're flexible and they're adaptive to how your business is scaling, how it's changing. But it requires sponsorship from leadership, right? They have to recognize that, yes, things are going to change. Like, this is not set in stone, and you have to really invest in the people being able to spend time to, what I would call it, playing with the tool itself, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, right? I don't know all the buttons in my car, but if I have some time, I'll sit in there and go, oh, what's this? And like, you try to play around with some of these things. Obviously, not when you're driving, but if you're pulled over on the side of the road and you have some time to kill, then you look around and you say, oh, wow, I didn't know my car could lock with me just touching the handle. Like, that's something I found with my Subaru that I had no idea about. So I think leadership getting the time and investing and allowing people to play with the tool and develop new capabilities will um, just make the overall process more efficient, but it allows them to think about new innovations that they could make in some of these other adjacent areas that you may have not thought about using it before. But now that you know
Right.
it's capable, now you can deploy it elsewhere.
Right. And regardless if you're going to do off the shelf or create it yourself, there is a time of adoption. I mean, we talked about it at the very beginning. This is seen as a disruption. It is being seen as a disruption for the way that people work. Why? Because we've been using, the same standard tools that are not connected, and we deposit them into folder structures that are online in a server. Well, none of that data is connected. The data that you add in PowerPoint slides, the data that you add in Word documents and Excel, in a notepad, in a dry erase board, none of that is connected to any other piece of data. And that is critical data because it captures our thoughts, it captures our motives, it captures our feelings at that time, it captures discussion points and actions and risks and decisions. And until you find a space to sort of combine all of the work that we're doing, and this sort of came out in my early days as a project manager, because I noticed that no one was really looking at anything that I was producing. And I thought to myself, what really is the role of a project manager? Now, I knew everything inside and out because I was constantly the one that was entering the information. But if it doesn't help anybody else, am I really using my time wisely? So it was really in that moment of just like, I need to make people, how do I say this? I need to make people invested. I need to get people invested in what I'm doing. And as soon as we started putting action items with names and started flashing those up, because you need to build again that visibility and people start seeing their names on there. Oh, well, I didn't realize this. Well, there's an automation. You received an email 2 days before this was due from this due date. You received another email. Like there's no, like we discussed this, and then you just conduct additional training, and eventually it becomes that habit. It becomes the way you work within that organization. So adoption is a key thing, but you can't, especially in the initial stages of launching, you can't just do a 1 hour lunch and learn and call it a day, because people need a little bit more than that. If you ask me, if you gave me 1 hour to be with my vehicle, I'm not going to know nearly as much stuff as I would if I get to go into that vehicle every single day and start to touch things and figure out how things move around. So it's super critical for that to be, cultivated within organizations, and it comes from leadership, whether it's a chief of operations of some point or the CEO themselves. It's critical to have. All we want is transparency. We want everything to, what's the biggest question you get from leadership? We don't know what's happening. We don't know when it's happening. We don't know enough. And guess what? Everything that they're saying is captured digitally somewhere. But we're putting it in slides, we're tucking it away, we're putting it in different folders that exist in other places. So we're not connecting all the pieces, we're not connecting all the discussions. And that's where, one of the comments from the white paper, and I love the way that they frame this, that integrating PPM tools into the fabric of your work. So you're weaving in these tools into the work that you're doing every day so that you don't have to repeat it. You don't have to rebuild it. You don't have to rewrite it, because it's there. It's there. And now, of course, there's a method to the madness, to the structure, but that's what experience gives you. I didn't build things the same way I did when I first started doing Smartsheet. Now, 8 years in, I'm going to think about 8 or 9 steps ahead and say, well, if we're going to run and do these activities here and we're not prepared to make that next step, we're going to build this in a way that leaves that door open for that next step. And we'll continue to do that because, in principle, when you innovate, It's not just one time. When your people change, when your tech changes, when your processes change, all of that needs to go in unison. When your process change, you need to train your people. When your tech change, you need to change your process and train your people. When your people change, you need to train the tech, you need to show the process. They may become a process owner. So this whole triangle, they go back and forth because they're constantly going to change. The only thing that we can predict is that change is going to happen. So we need to know that change doesn't just happen and then we just let that sit. It's going to affect all the other processes and our technology in that space.
Yeah, I think so. The only, I would say, truth, right, is that change is coming, and maybe change happens all the time, and there's no way to stop that from happening, right? Because people, technology, and the process changes as the business changes. I think you made an earlier point about some of the work that you were doing as a project manager sometimes gets lost in the void and maybe not visible or transparent to some people in leadership. I think using these PPM tools allows you to have very concrete data and evidence to support some of the decisions that end up driving some of the progress of the project, right? So,
yes.
If you're not using a PPM tool and you're working on a project where people are constantly complaining about something, just because something is being talked about often doesn't actually mean that that's the problem. And sometimes you need these tools to be able to measure and use data to say, well, you said this is a problem, but it's actually not the problem because here in this step, this is where nobody is recording information and this is where the gap is, right? So it just reminds me that, this availability bias that you have, right? Just because something is in your face all the time doesn't actually mean that that's the issue. But when you have a tool that is neutral to that mindset, and it's just this is clear, this is the data, this is the progress that we've made. Now your leadership isn't asking you, hey, what's the status on this? What's the status on that? It's very clear this is where the holdup is, or hey, we're making progress on this timeline. Whereas before it was, oh, I think so and so is on track, and it's like that's not effective. Like, how much time are we wasting here playing a guessing game on how far we've come or how much we still have left to do?
And the conversations change. The conversations change from status updates to strategy, alignment, transparency, curiosity. You actually have the time to focus on that. You can burn a whole project team meeting just throwing things to the wall to see what sticks. What do we know? What do we not know? Rather than, hey, what's the status? And, things that we can regurgitate from the work that we've done day to day. That's the whole idea here, is that you create these reports, you create these dashboards for those questions. Leadership, as much as leadership wants to have unique questions, et cetera, they're probably going to ask you roughly the same types of questions. So you build out your space to sort of allow for those questions to be answered through metrics, reports, et cetera, so that the question that actually does come is, hey, I've noticed this over the past couple of weeks. Is this something that we have concern about? How do you think that we should approach this? Are we doing additional training to ensure that this doesn't become an issue in the future? Those are the kind of conversations we need to have. Not, hey, what's going on? Hey, I saw this. Like, can you update me on that? Can you update me on that? Allow those data sets and those operational data, frequencies, durations, dates, what have you, sort of drive what is what is really a topic of concern that leadership can address. Show them where to point. Oftentimes we wait for top down. Let's wait for leadership to ask us. You have all the data. You do. Your team, your PPM tool has the data in this space. Start pushing that up. This is part of that managing up. Start pushing that up. Instead of getting these ad hoc requests that are driving you crazy, now you're going to start pushing all those things to leadership, the ones that they're consistently asking for. And that's just being driven by your day-to-day work.
Yeah, that's
So,
beautifully said. And I think we've spent much of this episode talking about the benefits of the PPM tool, how to deploy it, strategies around managing up and being more, I would say, conscious of the capabilities of the tools themselves, and also how do you manage change throughout the life cycle of the tool. If somebody's listening right now and they are in a position where, let's say, they do have a PPM tool, um, what's one thing they can do to determine how effective they are deploying it?
all right. So, how effective is the deployment of the PPM tool? So, these things take time. Now, they should take a little bit less time for the group that is directly managing it. So, the first things first, I think where we get a little bit stuck is that, and I've seen this before, we just want everybody to use it right away, right now. And what happens? You get a bounce back. I don't know what's going on. What is this? I didn't get a training. Who's going to train me now? And the person who has the most knowledge about that space does not have the capacity to train every single individual person in the organization. A 1 hour training of the whole company is not going to help either. There's this constant feeding and refeeding. Could you imagine if you learned one lesson in calculus and was like, okay, go on and do calculus? Like, you probably understood a little bit about that, but there's no way that you're going to just continue to like take on like this complex mathematical equations, etc. This is the same thing. You're going to learn a little bit within that 1 hour, and it depends on who's training it. Some people may train you on the theories behind it, how it works, and other people may just want to see how do I do what I need to do. I'm on the side of I'm going to teach you how this actually works, because you need to understand how to think through when you want to create something or when you want to modify something. The questions to start asking yourself. I think it's very important, rather than, you look at some of these PPM tools and they mimic tools that we've used in the past, Excel, Word, etc. So it's important for us to sort of create this team of champions. You have this one internal champion, and then you get a couple of more people, and you have this one team of champions that are within your department. Understanding that level of deployment there, I think, is critical. And then when you look at your adoption, are you hearing it in the hallways? Are you hearing people say like, oh yeah, like I have a Smartsheet for that. It's really cool. I'll share it to you. What does that look like? What does it sound like? Are you seeing people using Smartsheet dashboards to represent, current statuses, live data, live statuses? How is that PPM tool manifesting within the organization? And you start to see what people are doing. I mean, I go down the hallways of clients and just see numerous people on PowerPoint slides. So at the same token, I would expect to see numerous people using a PPM tool because they're logging information, reviewing, etc. So I would say you have to make sure that you build that core so strong, and in there you allow, and in discussing with these projects teams, you let them know that you guys are influencers. You guys are influencers. When you start showing other people the work that you're doing and how fast and efficient it is, that is where that sort of curiosity starts to come in. I got a secret for you, Lawrence, and for everybody else that's listening. People do not like to work hard. The work that you do can be challenging, but how you perform the work through PPM tools, it should not be your challenge. Your challenge should not be communicating what happened. Your challenge should not be recording things. Your challenge should not be finding a metric, locating a document. The work itself, the industry can have its challenges. Biopharma, the science, so much we don't know. So much we think we know and we're wrong, and we haven't figured that out yet. That stuff is hard. Should not be just how we do our day-to-day work should not be the challenge here. And unfortunately, in a lot of places it is.
Yeah, I think to sum it up, I think the final message is like you said, right? Creating this support network so that you can foster these like network effects, right? The more people that are using it, the more they're playing with it, the more things that they'll come up with and innovate in all sorts of ways for the way that they work. And but you got to have that leadership push from up above to say, hey, I'm going to invest and make this easier for people to use and not harder, right? Because you're right, the work
Make
that
a
we do
little
should not be more
competition.
difficult.
Yeah, make a little competition. Hey, whoever has the best, thing gets a lunch at Cheesecake Factory on the company, like for the whole team. Something like that where it just really rallies people like, okay, guys, like I think we could do this and it's going to improve our output by this. We have to, figure out some kind of
Incentives,
friendly
yeah,
competition or
incentives.
something like that. Incentives, exactly. These are, if we want that to happen, it's not going to happen by just saying, make a goal to innovate the work that you're doing. That, just because we want that, we have to cultivate that. We have to be responsible. Leaders have to be responsible to create the right environment for that to excel. If it really is a priority. If it's not, don't put it in a goal.
All right.
So again,
Sounds good.
I love integrating it into the fabric of your work, and it's something that we do with Sigma Lab Consulting every day, integrating this into the fabric of our work. So, like we said, your people, your tech, your process are key to navigating the change that is inevitable in the organization. Lawrence, thank you for your time. I hope our guests got something out of this. I enjoyed this time as well with you. And we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, sounds good. And where can people find the white paper?
We'll put that right now. It is a free white paper that is on Smartsheet's website. So we'll put the link in our show notes. The title of the white paper, you might actually be able to Google it. It's IDC white paper, The Power of Next Gen Project and Portfolio Management. So we'll put the link in the show notes, and then you can download the white paper simply with just entering your name and email information. So we'll make that available to folks so they can download that.
All right. Till the next episode.
Lawrence. Take care. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review, like, and share on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're interested in being on the show or becoming a sponsor, send us a message at leanbydesign@sigmalabconsulting.com.